Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Flooring Strategies podcast where we break down flooring industry secrets, stories, tips, and tricks. Today we got a very special guest, Mark Baldwin, owner of Floor Coverings International of Seattle Shoreline. Mark's got one of the probably most interesting backgrounds of anyone we've had on the show so far. Corporate career at Amazon, HR, finance, and now he's running his own flooring franchise. Mark, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks, Adam. My pleasure.
Awesome. So yeah, before we kind of dive into the deeper questions, for anyone that doesn't know you, who are you and what do you do?
So Mark Baldwin, owner of Floor Coverings International of Seattle Shoreline, actually in North Seattle as well. We just acquired a new territory. Um, I owned this franchise for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, spent time at Amazon and General Motors Financial in various finance and HR roles. Um, got a 4 and a 6-year-old at home and a lovely wife, and just spend most of my time either doing flooring or hanging out with my family.
Awesome. So yeah, what is if you can give us like a quick rundown, what does a typical week look like for you these days?
I'm a small business owner, so I get pulled in a lot of different directions, and some of it's out with clients working on flooring. A lot of it's also out networking with various groups like my BNI group, the various chambers of commerce that I'm in, and trying to network with businesses. Also working just kind of behind the scenes on stuff related to our financials and just running the business. And I have a small team of a total of 6 folks. One who's offshore. So I have to meet with them pretty regularly to keep them up to speed and make them feel part of the team. And then I've got a couple of design associates, a business partner, and some production folks that help us work with our installers on a day-to-day basis. So I'm kind of pulled in a lot of different directions, and hopefully the glue that keeps the team together.
For sure. That's awesome. Yeah, kind of a random one here, but what would you say your younger self would think you would be kind of end up doing like a career that you had in mind when you were younger?
It definitely wasn't flooring. I've fallen in love with the industry and really enjoy it, but and I always wanted to do something in finance or something related to that. And but then as I got my MBA and started like really thinking about business strategies, I think my younger self would have said, "Hey, yeah, go be your own boss." And I remember this time. It was a long time ago when cell phones were kind of just first a thing, and my dad was going to get his first cell phone, and he walked up to the cell phone counter, and the guy's like, "Well, who's your manager?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm the boss." I was like, that was kind of cool to hear. So
Yeah.
that kind of resonated with me, and always had in the back of my mind that I wanted, I always like managing and working with people, but it was just finding something that was my own, and I think that's my younger self would appreciate that, but I don't think I was ever gonna not be in a corporate role. So it was kind of, I think my younger self would be surprised.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I know you kind of mentioned, and we went over this before, that you had some experience with Amazon and then also in finance world. If you could give like a quick version, what were you doing kind of before flooring in the corporate world?
Yeah, so prior to Amazon, I worked for a subprime auto lender that got bought out by GM. I was in underwriting and a little bit of sales. Managed a branch office from pretty early on. I think I was 24 when I got my first branch office, and they kept consolidating branches into my branch. And so then they asked me to come down to corporate and run a couple different departments. So I did fraud prevention, some training, some uh, uh, policy and procedure compliance auditing, and some kind of specialty underwriting for the national network. And then I opened up a national service center. Then got my MBA, decided to try something different because I'd been at GM for so long. And worked for Amazon, started up a new team doing fraud prevention for their finance operations team, mostly looking at accounts payable and specifically expense reports. So I was the guy who was policing people's expense reports for a long time at Amazon, which was kind of
Hmm.
fun. And then worked a lot with the HR team in regard to that. Never thought I'd be in an HR career, but started chatting with a director in the HR department, and he was like, "Hey, I got this cool policy role that we're trying to roll out." And that worked out great, but then just wasn't going to be supported as a bigger thing. So they invited me to join their employee relations department as a leader for that group, did that for a little bit, but realized I didn't know enough core HR. So then I went and managed a bunch of HR business partners for a while, and then ultimately landed in a training role, and that was my last role at Amazon.
Gotcha. So quite the journey there.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
very,
Yes.
very different journey.
What made you kind of choose flooring though? Like why FCI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think from my perspective, I knew I wanted to run my own business. I didn't know what that was. I really liked the idea of franchising, and then got partnered with a franchise broker who kind of gave me 6 or 7 different franchises to start to look at. Started peeling back the onion on those, and then ultimately landed on 3 to 4 to really start to do some due diligence on. And my wife is a beauty professional. She's a licensed cosmetologist, and one of the franchises was waxing. We thought, wow, we're going to probably go into waxing. And then we kind of started thinking about that industry and decided that really wasn't for us. And flooring, while it was at the bottom, kept rising to the top for us. And so the reason it did was, I think, a couple different things. One, the support of both the franchise network and the franchisor. I could tell that culturally they were very supportive. And, I talked to a lot of different franchisees, and, I called random ones that, they didn't even tell me to call.
Yeah.
And even those folks were super supportive of someone just kind of calling them randomly. But I remember being on a call. They called it a discovery day, and I was one of the first people on the call. And the corporate team was just talking about that had gone bowling the night before, and with some other new franchisees, and just like listening to them talk about that experience. And I could tell that they were really vested in the success of their franchise network. And so just, this little kind of off the cuff moment just showed me that they're going to provide a ton of support, and they continue to do that today. So that's really what drew me to this franchise. And then ultimately, I think the mobile showroom that we have is a unique product offering, and coming from pretty big customer service companies, wanting
Mhm.
to partner with someone who has such a great reputation as far as customer experience goes is what kind of ultimately led me here.
Definitely. Yeah, and I definitely want to touch on the mobile showroom a little later, but when you made that kind of leap of faith, what was that like transition like going from a big corporate company to running your own business?
Yeah, I mean, obviously having to start from scratch is really unique, and kind of build processes. And I've done a little bit of that in my career, where starting new departments, so it felt somewhat comfortable, but also, you know, having to understand the budget and the P&L completely by myself, and start with just me and an office manager, and try to figure everything out on our own. With support of corporate and my co-op and other franchisees was there, but I wouldn't say it was scary, but I would say it was definitely something where I was like really focusing on a lot of different details, and
Yeah.
just kind of putting my head down and trying to figure it all out. So,
Was there ever a moment like early on where you thought like, what did I get myself into?
oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're first looking at you got payroll to make, and you got vendors to pay, and you're like, oh my God, where's that money going to come from? I mean, you certainly doubt yourself sometimes. So,
Yeah. Would you say so kind of going back to your corporate experience as well, you got a pretty like diverse background in that. Has any of that experience, especially like the HR experience, surprised you and how helpful it's been like running the business?
um, me, I think, yeah, I mean, obviously, having coach leaders on certain things, working with personnel and managing people and all that, I think has really helped me be successful in this role. I think it's also, giving me insight into things that I don't think I would have had otherwise, as far as like, um, you know, employment law and things like that, right? So like I'm able to understand certain risks that I can or can't take. And, I had a situation recently with an employee that there was a workers' comp situation, and trying to navigate through that on top of some performance issues, and trying to figure that all out. So,
Yeah.
being able to have that HR background really helped me.
Yeah. Has there been like a biggest lesson that like corporate life or that HR has kind of taught you that still applies kind of every day for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just understanding risk, and where you can pull levers from a talent and a just business risk perspective. HR, at least at Amazon, was a place that had a seat at the table, and it wasn't there just to like do talent management or talent acquisition and things like that. It was a strategic partner, and I kind of look at that strategic side of things differently. I think because of that experience.
Hmm. Was there anything that you kind of had to like completely relearn or learn from scratch other than like the I guess hard concrete things that had to do with the business?
I mean, maybe uh, I think the only thing I can think of is like maybe learning how to deal with a different generation. I think
Yeah.
I got a little bit of that because I had an intern at Amazon and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but not to the extent that I have now. It's with some staff and some of my installers and stuff. But just that's a new one for me.
Yeah.
And so just trying to navigate some of that and how I operate versus they operate. And, that's always a fun, interesting challenge.
Yeah. And so I know you're still pretty early on in your franchise kind of journey. For anyone kind of thinking about buying a franchise, what would you say is kind of the reality versus the expectation if there are like any outlandish expectations or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, obviously each franchise is different, but I
Yeah.
mean, I think everyone wants you to go spend money on something, and I think the big focus is really controlling that early on. That's definitely a hard lesson that I learned, when I'm, maybe had to borrow some more money or something, and kind of thinking about that. But it's really having. I mean, I had a business plan, but maybe trying to stay a little closer to it and really thinking about my spend on marketing and a few other areas where maybe I could have made quicker reactions to things and changed spending activities earlier on to maybe realize where that money was going and to spending more time in that realm. I think that's my biggest thing is like it's easy to just get caught up in the day to day and go try to sell, but you also need to go look at your bottom line and where money is going out the door and where you may need to make tweaks early on. And you know, it's a constant cycle, but it's at a different scale now, but it's still something that's always a challenge, but I'm at least a little more able to deal with it.
For sure. So what would you say is kind of like the hardest part that nobody talks about? Is it more of like that P&L kind of zooming out to the bigger picture, or is it?
Yeah, it's getting out of the weeds. The hardest thing is time management and knowing how to prioritize and what to prioritize. And it's a constant daily battle because there's a constant question. I mean, right before this call, I you know got a phone call. Hey, I need to deal with this, and I'm like, you have to wait 30 minutes,
Yeah,
and so it's just getting constantly pulled in different directions and how you manage that, how you prioritize your time and efforts, and that's always a challenge in a small business, but it gets better over time as you start to figure out where to spend that time best.
yeah, definitely. And kind of going back to when you were choosing like a certain business venture when you were looking at other franchises, what were you seeing was kind of like the biggest advantages of the franchise model versus like going for like a fully independent kind of venture?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I could go into something I knew nothing about and be trained on it, right? I think, and having systems and processes already in place, but also other people to lean on. Those are kind of the biggest things for me when thinking about a franchise versus just trying to, I don't, I would never have gone and bought a flooring store not knowing anything about flooring. I don't think. Um, but I mean, I could also see now, like having run my own small business, going into something completely different and being able to drop in and do that. But I think at least to start, franchising is a good way to, cut your teeth in owning your own business and learning what it takes to do that.
For sure. Yeah. And so I know we kind of mentioned earlier on the shop at home model. For any viewers that aren't familiar with like FCI or any of that, they work with a shop at home model with their mobile showrooms. I'm curious like what reactions you've been kind of getting with customers as it's not really like the typical like warehouse showroom kind of experience.
And yeah, most of our customers are a little bit surprised at our model, and they're like, there's people who are hesitant to invite people into their home, but at the end of the day, you have to get there to see the project, right? And we just try to do that up front in the shopping experience. And we have a mobile showroom that's got typically over 3,000 different samples or SKUs in there that covers most of the bases that we needed to cover on an initial appointment with someone, and it allows us to get you a price quote right on the spot typically, and see everything in your home. And I think that's the big thing is that like you can shop online for flooring and everyone's tablet or phone or laptop or monitor, TV, whatever it is going to be a different color, right?
Hmm.
And I always tell folks like the color you see in your home, that's what the color is going to be. You can look at online and room visualizers and things like that for variance and graining and patterns, but don't use it for color because it's gonna be different. And
Yeah.
so, for me, the model of being at home, be able to put things on your up against your walls, up against your furniture, up against other flooring, and see what it looks like and how it can complement or match things, is an experience that people just don't really seem to understand
Yeah.
um, at first. And then, we were at a home show this weekend, and we brought one of our mobile showrooms there, and just even people seeing it didn't quite realize what it was. We had to explain it to them, and then you'd see their eyes pop and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, wow, you actually come to us with all these samples," and we're like, "Yeah," like, "Oh, that's cool. That really makes sense," and they appreciate it once they really understand the model, but it definitely takes a little to get them to understand it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences is when you're in that kind of showroom environment, you got like the harsh kind of like bright white lights, and then like
Yeah,
when you bring that piece of flooring into your actual home and it's softer and more natural light, it's just like a complete like night and day difference.
for sure.
Yeah. But what would you say other than like the kind of mobile showroom? I would say it's a pretty unique like feature of FCI. I haven't really seen that many other franchises or independent places doing it. What would you say one of your biggest selling points or differentiators to other foreign companies in the market is besides the mobile showroom?
I'm, FCI provides it or prides itself on our service and the quality that we offer, and it's something that if we look at ratings across different platforms, both social platforms or independent studies, we time and time again are the number one rated flooring company in North America, and that comes from a belief in service in our model. And so, from consultation to installation to aftercare and things like that, we really try to handhold the process. So I think that really is something that's uh, culturally you know taught and talked about constantly at a corporate level and at our branch level. And so we're really focused on that experience with the customer, and other competitors aren't really focused on experience. You get passed from person to person, or
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, you talk to the salesperson, and then they're out of the picture, and then you can never hear from them again. That's just not our model.
Hmm.
So I think it's really important that that service is our differentiator. And
Hmm.
then we have direct manufacturer relationships, which obviously at scale helps us with pricing, also helps us with warranty support and things like that. And not that there's many warranty claims, but if there are, having the backing of the franchise and the manufacturer goes a long way, versus just going and buying something online and or at a big box store, and then it's all on you to figure out.
Yeah, definitely. And how would you say you guys are kind of handling competition from like big box stores?
Yeah, I mean, I, obviously there's a place for everything. The way I look at it is, in those situations, it's very impersonal. It's very on the consumer to go figure out and do the research themselves, and then just go make the purchase. And then maybe you can have to go find an installer, and all that can work out. But there's a lot of heavy lifting on your end, where we try to make it a seamless experience where they're showing you the product, showing you the differences in our products versus maybe theirs. I always, talk about an example of the different types of locking system in certain floating floors, and why a lot of places, maybe they, it looks like a great product on paper, but they aren't spending the money on the locking system, or maybe they have a wear layer that doesn't have another coating on top of it. And I would take a 12 mil wear layer with aluminum oxide coating over a 20 mil wear layer that didn't have that coating. And so you have to be able to like look at that fine print and understand where those little levers are. And like, yeah, that floor looks great at 299, but then when you go read the reviews, well, it kept falling apart because it
Yeah,
wouldn't stay locked together, and it scratched really easily. So, that's the type of stuff that we can show value against some of those things.
for sure. Yeah, and kind of doing like a deeper dive into the behind the scenes kind of stuff with FCI and also you. I know a lot of franchises like they'll set you up with marketing vendors. How has your kind of experience been with that?
Yeah, FCI's got some really great vendors, and we've supplemented with some other more local things as well. So I look at it as a very blended approach of needing some corporate level support and vendors that know the corporate ecosystem, but then also having to have vendors that understand local markets, or maybe also to just take it one step further. We do a lot of digital leads, and having those leads understand who you are and have brand awareness is an important thing that at a corporate level they're driving, and then some of our vendors are kind of that next step down. But like, how do you then get them to say yes and click you? And there's local efforts that we can do, social and on Google and SEO and more hyper local SEO. And so we
Yeah.
really focus on a lot of that stuff as well with the some other vendors that maybe we've brought on. But it's a nice blended approach of corporate sponsored vendors as well as vendors that we can bring on.
hmm And so with that, like, has there been a lot of testing to kind of find like the right balance with corporate and then local vendors as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always evolving, right? Because, with AI and,
hmm
differing strategies, we're always trying to test and see what works. We don't do a lot of print media, but that's something that, like, maybe that's another test that we need to do. I'm not a huge believer in sending postcards out to people and thinking that's
Yeah.
going to get people to give us leads, but I know there's some brand awareness there, and maybe that's something else we need to think about trying. And we've done some, little print magazine things here and there, but never really a good focused approach on it. So there's some opportunity there to try some different things that even corporate says would be a good idea. Just I know I'm the kind of guy who gets that Valpak thing in the mail and just
Just
tosses it and doesn't
tosses
look
it.
at it. Yeah, but I know there's obviously there's a purpose to that, and there's the right model that may be a little bit different, or maybe a little more specific that you can dial in better. So I'm always looking for new things.
hmm Yeah, and then kind of on the brand awareness side of things, hasn't social media kind of played a big role in that, or what are you guys kind of doing for that right
A
now?
little bit. I mean, we've definitely tried some different social things, and we're continually evolving that. I'd like to put more evergreen content out there. I think there's some really fun things that we could do. It's just about finding the time to do it.
hmm
We're also part of a co-op here, so we're talking about some strategies of co-op that we can do. But I'm social's been a small piece of that brand awareness campaign. We've been more boots on the ground, sponsoring local baseball team or a choir, a band, or a chorus, or doing sponsoring a 5K, or there's various little festivals around the area. So maybe set up a tent there and do stuff like that. We work with the actual a tool library. That's kind of a cool concept that we sponsor as well, and they have some events that we're going to be doing, home shows, things like that.
Yeah,
So I really appreciate the boots on the ground sort of approach to getting your brand out there, and you know, that's a big push for us, and has always has been, and will continue to be.
definitely. Yeah, and have you seen like I know a lot of guys I talk to, the kind of conventions and home shows are pretty massive and pretty lucrative sometimes. Have you seen kind of similar results for that?
Well, it's somewhat hit and miss. I mean, I've had some that have been amazing, and we just had two this year that one wrapped up yesterday, and just didn't see the results that I was hoping for compared to prior years. So but I know it's a good brand awareness thing. A lot of people took a business card or took some information, but it didn't yield the appointment results that I really strive for during those. But at the end of the day, we also recognize it's a brand awareness thing, and
Yeah.
so we hope that continues to build for us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of the strategies that I see these guys using are like getting like the initial brand awareness out with like the home shows or just kind of postcards, flyers, that kind of stuff. And then they'll have like retargeting campaigns with whether it's email, phone calls, outbound stuff. Yeah. But kind of zooming back out, what would you say? I know this is kind of a loaded question, but what would you say the best piece of advice you've gotten from the business kind of side you've ever received?
Good question. It's a pretty tactical thing, but it kind of goes into um, how you manage your day-to-day P&L, and protecting your margins, because we are, well, while we're not the most premium brand. We do provide a premium experience, and so I think there's a lot of value, and people will spend more money with you when you provide that level of experience. And it's easy to go, oh yeah, I'll go match that price, but at the end of the day, do you really want to do that? And it's really protecting yourself for the value that you're actually worth, for the time, the effort, and the experience that you're going to provide. And I think the biggest advice was kind of protecting that at all costs. And it's easy to just commoditize this business. Um, but sometimes you really have to look back and say, well, what are we doing that's differently, and how are we differentiating ourselves? And are people willing to, spend the money on that? And the answer is generally yes. Now, not every lead is like that, but
Yeah.
if you can show your value and the service that you can provide, then you should be able to command some premium over other people who maybe are just out there to sell you and just get in out of your house. That's not the experience that we want to provide, and
Yeah, for
hopefully
sure.
people pay for that.
Yeah. Um, is there anything you kind of wish you knew before getting into this business?
Um, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's just about having that plan, and but being more nimble to say, okay, you know what, I'm spending too much in this space. It's not yielding results. We need to make a change earlier before you start to say like, oh gosh, I need to go borrow some money or something. Like if you can see that ahead of time more and be more protective of your cash flow up front, especially when you're first starting. And I do a lot of validation calls for the franchise, and I believe in this franchise, so I do a lot of calls with prospective franchisees, and that's the advice that I give them.
Hmm. Yeah.
Everyone asks
So,
me that question,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's pretty easy to
yeah,
talk through it for personal experience.
yeah. And so I know you just said that you kind of talk with prospective people that are looking to get into the franchise. Um, if someone's kind of thinking of making that leap from corporate to owning a business, what would you kind of tell them?
Yeah, make sure you're well capitalized. Make sure you have a business plan. Make sure that you've explored and talked to people outside of what maybe corporates offer you. Not that corporates trying to dupe you, but of course they're going to talk to franchises that they know would be a good person to talk to. But you also want to do your own due diligence, and make sure you're talking to people outside that. And franchise disclosure agreements list all people that you can talk to in there, and so it gives you access to a lot of different people that most people wouldn't think to call. And I would recommend calling people that are it's a little bit of a cold call, but I think it's really valuable to kind of catch someone off guard and say, oh, you weren't expecting my call, but I want to talk about your franchise, and
Yeah, you get
here's what I'm
the
working with
raw
at corporate.
reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then I know, so kind of coming from corporate into that big flooring industry, what are kind of have you seen any stereotypes about the flooring industry that are just blatantly wrong that you kind of figured out?
Yeah, but I think, some of it again, like, is that people do believe it's just a commodity and it's not a service. And I think it's easy to get caught in that. But I think that's kind of and people don't have a good experience with contractors and stuff. And a lot of
Yeah,
times it's because they've just gone and taken the cheapest price. So they found someone who can install it for them, but are they bonded? Are they insured? And stuff like that. So there's a lot of, things out there that are easy to screw up, and people can kind of sort of think the industry is trying to screw people when
yeah,
in reality it's not. It's you just have to find the right people that are out there trying to with your best interest in mind.
definitely. Yeah, and then kind of zooming out again, like looking more towards the future, where do you kind of see the flooring industry going in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think a couple things that we're seeing here from a trend perspective. I think uh, laminates are making a push again, as think locking systems have gotten better. As there's more waterproofing materials. In laminate, before you put a drop of water on laminate, it would just swell up, and that's not really the case anymore. I mean, I can think of countless stories where I've seen water intrusion on laminate. That new laminate, and it's actually held up very well. So I think there's going to be a continued push away from some LVPs, or at least some of the thinner LVPs. I also think, at least in our area, there's a loose lay flooring, that's a it can be laid down without gluing down, but it's a thicker version of a glue down. I see a lot of trend toward that, especially in homes that have leveling issues and things like that, where people, don't want to spend a ton of money leveling their floor, and to properly put a floating floor, and you get a very pretty tight tolerance there. With the glue down, you can do a lot more without as much leveling. So I think people maybe trending towards some of that type of stuff is going to continue to be a big push.
Definitely. Yeah. And then before we kind of wrap up, forget if I asked you this, but did you have like foreign knowledge before this? Because it seems like you know quite a lot, but
Zero.
was it just it was just
I
all picked up on
knew
the job?
nothing. Yeah, no, I've, obviously this is my baby, and I've really, done what I can to learn as much as I can in this business, and but I couldn't have, I thought I had hardwood at my house when I bought it, and turns out it was LVP. So that was the extent of my flooring knowledge when I bought my house 4 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And then kind of before we kind of fully wrap this up, where can people find you if they want to reach out or get a quote or potentially if they're prospecting for like a franchise opportunity?
Yeah, you can always email me, mark.baldwin at fcifloors.com. FCI Floors is our corporate website. You can go there, put your zip code in if you're local to Seattle, and you'll find myself or one of the other five other franchisees in my co-op. So all of us are pretty awesome at what we do, and would love to help anyone out. But email or going on the website and put an inquiry in is probably the best way to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, Mark, this has been awesome, man. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
My pleasure.
Guys, if you're in the Seattle area, Shoreline, Lake Forest Park area, you need new floors, go check out Mark's team at Floor Coverings International. Links will be in the description as well. But yeah, Mark, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome.